Well, it's wonderful to be back with Building Blocks. It's been, I guess, just about a year since I was here last, and a lot has changed. And we got a lot of great things that really help focus on the consumer and help the consumer out that we're going to go over tonight. And so we'll just go ahead and kick things off here with the biggest news. Let's see here. There we go. So, as we did the presentation last year, I kind of gave everybody a background as to the credit score, what comprises the credit score, tips on how to increase the credit score. We kind of went through a lot of that. And that kind of sets the stage now to some of the changes that have happened. And the biggest change that I want to make sure everybody knows about is a really positive change, and that is the national repositories have changed how they handle medical collections. And just to give a little background, for years, it was always a medical collection that a lot of times tripped people up and really hurt their credit score and prevented them from buying a house or getting the best rate on a house or even a car or anything like that. So what the bureaus found is that, somebody that has maybe a $50 or a $30 medical collection to a doctor, maybe their spouse thought the other one's insurance was covering it, or it was put in the child's name and the parent never got it, or whatever the story may be. There were a lot of errors that happened, and people would end up having a $30, $50, $70 collection on their credit report, and it would destroy their credit scores to the point where some people couldn't get a loan at all, or other people had to pay a premium at a much higher interest rate. So it was really, really unfair. And to top things off, when they looked at the data, they realized that, wow, just because somebody misses a $30 doctor payment copay, that's not really indicative of missing, a 30 years worth of a mortgage payment and things. So they got smart about this, thank goodness, and decided to go ahead and make some changes. And the biggest change that happened last July is that any paid medical collection now comes off the credit report. So if you had a medical collection or you have one, simply paying it off when it updates at the bureaus, the next reporting cycle, it will come off your credit report. And if it's not on your credit report, then it can't be factored into your credit score. So a lot of consumers are seeing their credit scores going up because of that, especially consumers that may have multiple medical collections. And we see that a lot. If somebody had an accident or they had some kind of illness, and by the time you get into the blood, people that take the blood and the doctors and the specialists and the hospital, you can end up with several vendors that are all kind of tied up in the process. So that has been just a huge help for consumers. So that's the first piece. The second piece that comes along is that if you do have a medical collection, let's just say you're not going to pay it at that point, well, now they've increased the period of time that you as a consumer have to make it right with the doctor and figure things out before it hits your credit report. Before it was to give you a 6-month window. Now you have a 1-year window. So if you're late, let's just say you go to the doctor today, you have a full year where you don't have to pay that before it can ever go on your credit report at all now. So that's a really good positive thing. And then the last piece to that is the things I just talked about were paid medical collections. So that's been great since July, and it's helping a lot of people out now. But effective March 30th, the end of next month, then what's going to happen is any medical collection that's under $500, doesn't matter whether it's paid or not, it's automatically coming off. And again, the logic behind this is, hey, again, if you have a $200 or $300 issue, that's not really going to impact you making a car payment or a mortgage payment years and years from now. So they put that change in there. So that's very, very important to know. If you know somebody that's getting ready to go out and buy a house or even a car or anything like that, and they've got some medical debt that's on their credit report, if it's under $500, even if it hasn't been paid and they're still trying to work it out, it'll come off effective March 30th. So again, anybody that's in that situation, you may want to wait till after March 30th to have your credit pulled and look at things, because it is going to make a huge difference. And if you're in a situation right now where you do want to, just pay it to take care of it, then again, go pay it. As soon as it updates at the bureau level, which typically is up to 30 days, then it'll come off your credit report. So that's some really, really good news that I wanted to share right off the bat here. The next piece to it is they've announced FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all the different groups that handle mortgage loans in the country have come out and they've said, these scoring models, they're old. They're 20 years old in some cases. And just to give you an idea, these scoring models, like we talked about last year, there's different versions of them, and each industry is using their own special version of things. And think of it like software on your phone, when you update to the latest operating system, or software on your laptop. There's many, many different versions out there. So each industry looks for different things. And, you have a consumer score, which is where you go like at Credit Karma. You have different scores that credit card companies use, or somebody that's looking for insurance or whatever. Well, in the mortgage industry, which is where I primarily focus, along with Tidewater Home Funding, we have the strictest models. Our models, again, haven't been updated in 20 years. They've been very, very strict. So what's happening is the group that oversees all the housing, they've said, you know what, we're going to allow 2 new models to come into the play here. One of them is the FICO 10T, and the other one is the Vantage 4.0. Now, they're going to come in sometime next year, and they're going to have enhancements, which is trying to make it better for the consumer, so that, if you have these situations like the medical collections that I just talked about, they're not going to penalize you as much. One of the big key components to this is the way that they're going to handle payment of credit cards. And what happens right now is, basically it's whatever's in that snapshot that they take. So you pull my credit report today, whatever's in there today, that's what you have to deal with. Where the newer models are going to be more sophisticated, they're going to look back over a 24-month history, and they're going to see that, oh, wow, David paid his credit cards on time and paid them off every single month for the last 23 months. And then last month, oh, yeah, he hasn't paid it yet. But instead of writing in today's world, that could really penalize me because it looks like I have a high balance. Whereas once you look at the trended data, in this example, it's going to say, wait a minute, no, he's paid it perfectly. So therefore, I'm not going to get hit as hard in some cases having the newer models. So we welcome that. Our industry welcomes that. And we think that's going to be great for home ownership, moving forward. So those are things that you'll probably hear about in the news about these new, credit scoring models. And I just wanted to give you a little insight as to the background of that. And again, they look at the trended data is all going to look at the last 24 months of the history, and use that more so in the credit scoring than just that snapshot of what's taken that particular moment in time. So those are just some exciting things that are happening. There is something that I know Tidewater Home Funding wanted me to touch on right now, and this is kind of a way that if you're getting ready to enter the home buying process, you need to be aware of this. And that is that, when you go to a mortgage company and they pull your credit, they're going to go and do a hard inquiry most of the time to see, if you qualify. And when they do that, your inquiry, when you go to Equifax or you go to TransUnion, the fact that a mortgage company goes and gets your data, they sell that as what's called a trigger lead. And these companies can go out and buy this data and say, hey, we know that David was shopping for a loan yesterday. Tidewater Home Funding pulled his credit report, so we want to go after him and see if he'll use us. So what happens is a lot of times being a consumer, this can really scare a consumer because, you're sitting there and you're like, well, I applied with Tidewater Home Funding. Why are 20 other companies calling me and they're from all over the country, and they're trying to tell me I have to hurry up and do all these things. So it can be very, very predatory and can be very confusing for consumers. And sometimes consumers can say, well, yeah, my spouse applied yesterday. What can I help you with? They start giving out personal information, thinking that it's the person that they should be working with when it's not. So it's very, very important to know that these leads exist, and that if you go to a mortgage lender, chances are that information is going to be sold. And it's not the mortgage lender's fault. It's the credit bureaus are the ones that are doing this, not the mortgage lenders. But it's going to happen. And, the mortgage lenders aren't authorizing this. They don't want it. They're trying to stop it because they don't want people coming and trying to get their customer, of course. So the only way to really, truly stop this is by having a consumer, go reach out to the bureaus and opt out of this practice. And later on, I'll give you, some information on how you can do that, the website and the phone number you can call to opt out of those pre-screened offers, so that you're not bombarded and confused by everything. Because quite honestly, when somebody's getting ready to buy a house, especially when it's their first house, they're like, hey, we're trying to go through this process. We got a lot of things going on. The last thing they need is all these 20 companies trying calling them, trying to solicit them and trick them and all kinds of things. So very, very important to know that. And again, these leads come right away. I mean, they'll call you, they'll email you, they'll come send you direct mail pieces. They'll even come door to door in some cases. I mean, we've actually heard of that happening. So just wanted to give you, a heads up on that. That is a practice that's going on right now. The big dangers, besides just the inconvenience of not knowing what's going on, a lot of them are bait and switch companies. They're companies that are in different states that don't know the rules of the state that you're living in. So a lot of times the offers can look very enticing, but when you actually go to that, then what happens is they then pull your credit. So they're giving you other advice, and a lot of different problems can happen. Plus, you're also putting all your personal information out to another entity that you're not really that familiar with. So got to be very, very careful with that and be aware of it. And if you want to opt out, again, I'll tell you how to do that in a few slides. So again, you can opt out, just be aware that they, exist. And then anytime that you're pulling your credit report as a soft pull, as a consumer, those will not generate a trigger lead. They're only generated when you apply for credit with somebody. So I wanted to just make sure that was clear. Another big question that we get asked right now is, hey, is it okay to shop around? So, on the kind of the subject of trigger leads, it's like, well, what happens if you truly do want to shop around? And a lot of people say, well, what happens to my credit score? And as we talked about last year, inquiries, you are allowed to have inquiries as long as they're in a certain period of time. They'll only count one time, basically. And, in the mortgage industry, we use 30 days. There are other different models that use different time frames, 14, 45. Typically, if you're dealing with like credit cards and car loans, you can, you have a 45-day window. So it really just depends on which model you're being graded on. But again, for our discussion purposes, we'll say the mortgage industry using 30 days is what we're going to look at. So what that means is if you have your credit report pulled today, for the next 30 days, you can go and have as many credit reports pulled as you want, as long as it's in the same lender category. So as long as they're mortgage companies, you'll be okay with that. The last thing you want to do is pull your credit report today, on the 16th of February, and then again on the 20th of March, and then the 30th of April. You keep pushing it outside of the 30 days, and then your credit score can go down because every time you have an inquiry outside of that time frame, you will get penalized. So wanted to, just go over that. I also wanted to highlight some of the things, some of the best practices that we talked about before, and I want to hit these again. And that is, make sure, especially as we get into these new scoring models and the trended data, you want to make sure that all your credit cards are paid down below 30% of your credit limit. So real simple, it's $1,000 credit limit on the card. You want to keep it under $300 at all times. That's the ideal way to go. Because what happens is once you start to go over 30% and you owe 50%, your score will go down. Then again, it's 70%. Then when you're maxed out. So in order to keep the highest credit score possible, keep all your balances under 30%. The next thing is we want to be very careful about opening and closing accounts. So in the credit world, every single trade line is aged. So it starts off as a brand new account at 0, and then it'll count up all the way to 99. And that means you've had it for 99 months. The scoring models love older established accounts. They do not like new accounts, especially ones that are less than 6 months old. They haven't been seasoned yet. So what a lot of people may do is they may say, you know what? I have these 2 old credit cards that I've had forever, and they're all sitting at 99 months old. I'm upset. I don't like the annual fee or whatever. So I close those and then go order brand new cards. Well, that's the worst thing you can do, because now the model thinks you have these unseasoned accounts, and your credit score will drop. So you want to be very careful about opening and closing accounts. Also, if you do open a new account, you want to make sure you use it every month. Because a lot of times if you just use it 1 or 2 months and then stop, then that counter will always show 1 or 2 months. It'll never get to age to the 99 months that it needs to. So that's why you got to make sure you use it. And it can be as simple as a cup of coffee, tank of gas, doesn't matter. Just go put some kind of transaction on it each month and then pay it off each month. Make sure you're doing that on all your revolving accounts every single month. And if you do that over time, that'll build the high credit score. That's really the trick that you want to make sure that you're doing. Using it, paying it off every single month. You also want to be careful about consolidating debt down on one card. Now, a lot of times they're very enticing offers. Hey, put all your balances on our card and we'll give you 0%. Although it's enticing, that can really hurt your credit score, because on that particular card, you'll be maxed out or at a very high utilization rate, and that's going to drop your credit score. So again, you want to be very careful with that. And again, all these tips, these are designed for people that are going to be entering, the credit world in the next year, meaning they're going to buy a house, they're going to buy a car, or they're going to really need to have the highest credit score possible. So that's what all this advice is geared toward. Actually, hold on one second. I see a question here. Oh, here we go. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and take a break here and answer this question. So how far back can the collection company go back to collect a medical bill? And that is a great question. So when we talk about credit, there's good credit and bad credit. So anything good can stay on forever. There's no statute of limitations on that. We don't care about that. That's great. Anytime there's something derogatory or negative, it automatically falls under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And that has very specific rules. And it says that if you put something on a consumer's credit report that's derogatory, it can only stay on for 7 years. So that's it, 7 years on the credit report, except for a bankruptcy, which can go out to 10 years. So that's the credit report. Okay, so that's what we're talking about in the being able to report on the credit report. As far as actually, the reality of collecting the debt, that depends on each state and their different statute of limitations. Because even if something, is on the credit report, maybe the statute of limitations has expired. Maybe it's in a state where you can only collect on a debt for 3 years, in which case after 3 years, they can't collect on it anymore, but it can still show up on your credit report. Conversely, let's say the statute of limitation is 10 years. Well, it falls off your credit report after 7, but they can still go after it for the additional 3 years. So a lot of those things come into place. There's two separate issues there. But as far as the credit report goes, it can only stay on the credit report for 7 years. That's it. So good question. So another thing we want to do here is make sure that you're reviewing your accounts for accuracy. Now, a lot of times if you're going to work with Tidewater Home Funding and you're working with them for a mortgage, they're going to come to us and get your credit report, and we're going to work through that together with them. And, if you need to, if you're perfect, that's great. But if we can get your credit score higher, we'll work with them to get your credit score higher. But if you're not entering the home market and you just bought your house, you bought your car, so you don't really need anything for years, but you want to be proactive on your own and just keep a look at things, then you can go to annualcreditreport.com. And that's a great site to go to. It's not, it's mandated by the federal government that every year, each consumer gets one free copy of their credit report at each bureau. So you can go in January, do all 3 of them, or you can stagger it and every 4 months do a different bureau. But the point is you go in there for free and you can get your credit data. You can see exactly what's in your file. And you also get a reference number so that if something's wrong, you have a nice mechanism to correct it right then and there and say, hey, this isn't right. Investigate this. And you can then challenge things and get the bureaus to, investigate. And then once you as a consumer say, hey, this isn't right, I need to have this investigated, I dispute this, then what happens is the burden of proof goes back on the bureau. And the bureau now has, by law, they have within a certain period of time, 30 days, to research that and confirm that it truly is accurate. And then what they have to do is go back to the creditor and say, hey, Ford Motor Credit, why did you put this late payment on the borrower? And then if they can't substantiate it or they don't respond, either way, then it has to come off, and it will come off the credit report at that point. So it's great to have, to know about that resource and to use that resource to go in and make sure your credit is in good shape. Because the last thing you want is, all of a sudden when you're right in the middle of trying to buy a house to discover that there's a problem. You want to be as proactive as possible and find out about this as early on so you have time to deal with it, get it corrected, so that when you do sit down to make loan application, you've got a great credit score, and then you can move forward with the fun stuff, which is buying the house, buying the car, and getting excited about that instead of having to worry about your credit report. So we always want to make sure we make the payments on time. I know it sounds really simple and very, very, almost ridiculous to say that, but again, All payments should be made on time. And a lot of times, life happens, so a lot of times what we recommend is for, especially your credit cards, to put them on the auto minimum pay. Just set it up to just whatever that minimum is. Even if you're going to pay more every month, that's fine. But just set that up so it's done and it's working for you, and you're not going to have a late payment if you do that. So that's the ideal way to do that. And again, bringing past due accounts current, you want to be careful with that, especially around mortgage time, because a lot of times day last activities can change and people can buy and sell debt. So you want to definitely work with your lender when it comes down to the past due accounts. But with medical collections, none of that applies. You can just pay a medical collection off now and no problem, because it's going to come right off your credit report. So no worries there. And again, we talked about limiting your revolving amount of indebtedness. And then again, avoid credit-related inquiries. That's basically what we talked about with having that 30-day shopping window. Make sure you limit it to that time frame, and you really think long and hard about who you want to have pull your credit report, because once that happens, they have all your data. So you want to be careful with that. Go to the next. Oh, we have another one here. Okay. Oh, here we go. Great question. I can already tell. It talks about hard pulls and soft pulls. So what is the difference between a hard pull or a soft pull on your credit, and how does it affect your credit score? Love that question. So two kinds of inquiries, hard and soft. So the soft pull, that is when you as a consumer go and access your credit report. So if you go to annual credit report or you go to Credit Karma, that's you as a consumer doing a soft pull. There is no impact at all on your credit score. It doesn't. You can do that a million times in a month. Doesn't matter. All year long, you can do it. It's not going to impact your credit score. So that's you initiating your own credit. There's also your creditors will do soft pulls on you without you really even knowing about it. When you sign that cardholder agreement, like I have a Capital One card. So when I got my Capital One card and all that verbiage that I signed, it says that, they will monitor me. So what happens is a Capital One will go in a couple of times a year and do a soft pull on me. Again, it doesn't impact my score, doesn't hurt me in any way, but it's their way of checking up on me and making sure that I'm not getting involved with too much other debt in other areas, or my credit score hasn't dropped dramatically. So they'll look at me and say, oh, he's fine. And sometimes that's why you'll get just this random credit line increase or a random credit line decrease. It's what that is that's creditors going and watching you and saying, well, they're a little overextended, or no, they're doing great, we're going to give them some more. So that's how that whole process works. So with the soft pulls, we're not really concerned about that. We also now have some lenders out there that are pulling soft pulls to pre-qualify different individuals. And that's fine too. So if you go to your lender and say, hey, we don't want to have a hard pull, and the lender says, that's fine, we'll do a soft pull, not to underwrite a loan or give you a loan, but it's just to let you know, hey, this is what you would qualify for. And if you want to proceed forward, then we'd pull the hard pull at a later time. So that's totally fine too. Not going to hurt your credit score, not going to hurt anything. So then we get to the hard pulls. The hard pull can impact your credit score, like we talked about before, because you get hit one time and then you have that window to shop. So if you keep going outside of that window, then yes, your score can continue to go down because of the hard pull. But the hard pull is when you're going to an institution, car dealer, bank, mortgage company, and saying, hey, I want to make an application for credit. I want you to extend me credit, and I'm making that application. That's when that firm offer of credit happens, and that's when you get the hard pull. And that will, like I said, it will impact your credit score, and it will be a hard inquiry. It'll stay on your file for 2 years. And that'll also, help out with some other things too, because number one, the mortgage company can use it to underwrite the loan, but also they can use that to help do different tools and stuff for you. Like if you need to have your credit score increased, they can run different simulators on that. They can go in and do rescores and stuff like that. So, so that's great. And one other segue to that is, are pre-qualifications considered hard or soft? Pre-qualification reports in the mortgage industry are soft pulls. That's typically what they will use as a soft pull to do that. So very good question, and very good that everybody kind of understands that. So if if you're working with somebody and they give you the option, then the next question is, well, yeah, I'd like to have my soft pull you do my soft pull to see where I'm at and what I can qualify for. And then at a later time, then we can do the hard pull if we're really going to move forward with things. So that's absolutely the best way to handle that. So the next piece I wanted to talk about here is the resources. So in order to opt out of the trigger leads, like we talked about before, on the screen, you can see the, let me minimize that. You can actually see the website, optoutprescreen.com, or you can call the 888 number and remove your name from the list. And again, this will cut down on your junk mail. This will help prevent your ID theft. It'll stop all those trigger leads and all that stuff that happens once anybody gets wind that you're shopping around for a loan. And then the other resource is the annualcreditreport.com. That's what I talked about going once a year, getting your free copy of your credit report, just so you can know what's in it and act accordingly if there's anything that's wrong with it.